We are now 7 games into the 23-24 season. Despite it being very early in the year, we're not even at Thanksgiving yet, and already it has become abundantly clear that this team is not it. Granted, most of us already knew that, even among the most optimistic fans like myself who thought this team was still going to be better than most people thought and had them winning around 46 games. Even then, for those who were higher on this team than most, at the end of the day, we knew this team wasn't going to be doing anything serious in the playoffs. They certainly were not a title team, and they weren't even a team that you could realistically see making it to the conference finals. So the question is, how much longer is this front office going to let this continue? How long do they continue to push for continuity, cohesion, whatever the buzzword is that they're using these days, before they stop delaying the inevitable, admit defeat, and go in a different direction? Well, it's what we'll be discussing in this video, but first, a big shout out to the sponsor of this video, SoRare, which I am super excited to tell you guys about their platform, especially considering it is free to join. It is super fun, and you get to win prizes, collect digital cards and assets in the form of NFTs. Unlike most fantasy sports apps, they are different in that it's actually a fantasy gaming marketplace. There is no gambling or betting of any kind. The site enables you to play where users own their players forever. Think of it like you're a GM creating your own dynasty, and you're competing weekly in fantasy competitions for great prizes. Users are owners or general managers of their team, making trades, buying and selling players, all that good stuff. And unlike other gaming sites or betting platforms, it doesn't cost you anything to play. You can start for free. I've created my own private league where you can compete and play against each other for prizes and offers, so check it out if you're interested. Join my private league. Link is in the description. We got some great people in there, and thanks again to SoRare for sponsoring this video. Now, I'm going to throw out some numbers through the first 7 games of the season that will illustrate why this year, despite it being early days and things could be course corrected, why the initial sample size is more concerning than it just being an early season overreaction. So the Bulls are currently 2-5, we all know this. Some of these games were easily winnable. Their strength of schedule in those first 7 games haven't been insanely difficult. Through 7 games, they're 25th on offense, 24th on defense, a net rating 28th in the league. They're dead last in pace. When it comes to three-point shooting, something the Bulls struggled with all of last season, they're currently 26th in the league in three-point volume, 28th in terms of three-point percentage, which is concerning because at least last season, they weren't taking many threes. They were last in the league in three-point volume, but they were hitting them at a better rate. They were around the middle of the league in terms of three-point percentage last year. But now, they're still not taking as many threes, and they're not even hitting them when they are taking them, currently shooting threes at 31%. That is abysmal. Now, I still maintain that some of these poor shooting numbers will improve eventually, things regress to the mean, right? But in the early going, the bigger concern is that the Bulls, despite adding some three-point shooting with Carter and Craig, they still find themselves in the same position as last season. In addition to this, the Bulls are 29th, second to last in assists per game, 25th in rebounding, 26th in blocks. And look, I said in a recent video that sometimes we get a little too bogged down in the numbers. Advanced analytics especially don't tell the whole picture, but when you're seeing a common trend happening, that is a carryover from last season, you simply can't ignore it. When Zach Lavine, DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Vucevic have a negative net rating of 20.8 in the first 7 games of the year, the worst in the league among all trios, a group of 3 players who have had a net negative rating every season since they've been together, and that net rating continues to get worse and worse with every passing year. It gets to a point where you say, okay, there is a theme here, and it's that these 3 guys don't work. The version of the Bulls that we see right now is done. It would be one thing if it was just the first 7 games of the season of these guys playing together for the first time, maybe it's an early season slump, but when we've seen this consistently happen for the last 3 seasons, we've seen a sample size big enough where we know that this group is not it. And so if the fans are able to see this, it's not like I'm the only one who's called this out. You've seen the media talk about this. Other fans throughout Bulls Twitter and Reddit are pointing out all of these areas of concern. If it's clear as day to everyone else watching this team, even throwing the numbers out of it, just using the eye test and watching these guys night in and night out, we can all see it, that this group is done, they're cooked, and it's time to move on. If the fans are able to view this, why is it that the guys who are paid big money to run the team not able to see it? Why have they continued to double down in running it back and keeping this crew together, hoping and clinging on to the fact that they can somehow miraculously turn things around and completely alter the way they've been playing for the last 3 years? You get to a point where they have to accept that these guys are who they are. They're not going to change the way that they play. I'm mainly talking about the big three or the mid three, whatever you want to call them. They've been in the league for a long time. It's not like they're young players early in their careers that can develop and evolve their games. They're not changing how they play this late in their careers. They're not. Here's the problem though. I'm pretty sure the front office knows that this crew is cooked. I don't see how you can realistically think that this team can remain together and still be successful. And if you do still believe that, then boy, do we have bigger problems as it relates to the overall competence of this front office. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they see this, but they're too prideful to come out and say it. And they're also just trying to work within the confines of the ownership being cheap and unwilling to go into the luxury tax, which hamstrings their ability to actually bring in quality talent, quality shooters, and rotational players to help round out this roster and fix some of their biggest weaknesses. But the problem is that even despite the fact that it's clear as day that they need to go on a fire sale and rebuild, pull the trigger and start over, knowing what we know of this front office, they're going to wait until the last minute before giving in. They're going to wait until closer to the trade deadline before making any significant moves. And to be honest, they might wait until the offseason to really revamp this roster. Because when you look at what the front office has done, they came into a situation of a team that was on their fourth year of a rebuild. They weren't really making much progress. They had a star player that was going to soon hit free agency. Instead of continuing to build on what they had, they decided that we're going to accelerate the timeline and try to win now by trading for Vucevic and mortgaging their future in the process. They trade Lauri Markkanen, who would go on to be an all-star later on. They decided to execute sign-in trades for Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan, further giving up more of their assets. They eventually would go on to give Zach Lavine a max contract. They made all of these win-now moves, and what do they have to show for it? One playoff appearance and one playoff win. And now, with not much in the way of the future to look forward to, despite making all these win-now moves that resulted in very few wins, that's a tough pill to swallow if you're AK, coming into this role and completely botching your first attempt to turn this franchise around. We all are prideful in the decisions we make in life, and it's hard to admit when we've made mistakes. And to do so on this type of scale, when they're trying to pick up the pieces of a jaded fan base that despise the previous front office, and then essentially do a repeat of some of their poor choices that are usually made by Garpax, yeah, you're going to cling to every hope possible that will justify your decisions. You want to have that I told you so moment that you knew what you were doing all along and held out and waiting for this group to finally figure it out. But there comes a point where that ship has sailed. You accept defeat and you cut your losses. And the front office needs to do this sooner rather than later, because the longer they wait, the trade value of some of their biggest assets is going to continue to diminish. And if you're going to eventually trigger a rebuild, you kind of want to start with a top lottery pick in this upcoming draft, since the Bulls actually have their pick this year. And the longer they keep this core together, they're going to win more games than they would otherwise do if they just did away with some of their best players that would further prevent them from getting a top pick, which again, just prolongs the rebuild process even further. I hate that we've come to this point, I really do, because you all know, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I am not a fan of the tanking to rebuild model. It's never guaranteed, and it instills a losing mentality in the players in the franchise. But based on where we're at with this team, with little prospects for the future, there really is no other direction to take this in, outside of just trading Lavine, DeMar, and Vooch for other stars in the league. But who? Julius Randle? No thank you. Pascal Siakam? Doesn't move the needle. Really the only path forward is to tear this whole thing down. They tried, it didn't work, cut your losses, and move on. And it would be best served to start that now rather than wait until February at the trade deadline, or even worse, next offseason. The Bulls are 50-70 ever since the All-Star break in 2022, 20 games below 500. That says all you need to know. Continuity isn't going to happen with this group. So I ask all of you now, at what point do you think we'll finally start seeing meaningful changes to this team? Will it happen in the next few weeks, closer to the trade deadline, or even into next offseason and beyond? Could you imagine if they actually keep this group intact and try and run it back yet again next season? With the thought process that since Lonzo is coming back, everything will go back to what we saw in 2021. I feel like I'll lose my mind if that happens. But anyway though, guys, let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.